We're very excited to have everybody here today together. For those who I haven't met, my name is Tyler Rohrball, and I'm our head of client partnerships. But to get things started, I'm going to pass it over to Shaunak Roy. So Shaunak, if you can hear me, go ahead and take it away.
Yes, thank you, Tyler. So very excited to actually meet everybody today, whoever could make it. My name is Shaunak Roy, as Tyler said. I'm the founder and CEO of Yellowdig. And we are excited to unveil our new product, Yellowdig Engage, with you all this afternoon. Yellowdig Engage is a digital platform that powers lifelong learning. So this is a theme that you're going to hear throughout the presentation today. And hopefully you will enjoy it, based on what you can, things that you can pick up from this session. Moving on to the next slide, Tyler. I just kind of briefly go over the agenda for the day. So this is a 3-part webinar. I'll get you guys started with giving you a background about Yellowdig, the reason for Yellowdig Engage, and the problem that we are solving. Then I'll pass it over to Tyler, who you just met. He's going to actually show you Yellowdig Engage and live. So kind of really get to see the platform and the new things that we are bringing to the market. And then finally, the third section would be kind of led by our head of customer success, Brian Vadine, to kind of show you some best practices and some efficacy studies that we have done to show the value of the platform. Please post your questions in the chat session. There's a small bubble chat that we'll see after, as you are kind of getting questions, and we will try to get to them, at the end of each section of this webinar. And also, just to kind of saying, this is a 45-minute planned webinar, so we would have only so much time today to cover each topic. However, we are planning in-depth webinars in the coming weeks where we will kind of dive deep into each topic and kind of really answer all your questions. With that, Tyler, if you just go to the next slide. One thing I would just kind of wanted to start with today is that we have been around for 5 years now. And in that period, we have worked with over, I would say, almost 100 plus institutions, mostly the US, and have impacted over 250,000 learners. That might seem a long time in a fast-paced world of technology startups or tech startups, but I would say we view ourselves as an education company, and we are also on our own path of a lifelong learning journey. So. We are very glad and very fortunate to work with a lot of you who may have joined the webinar today, as well as probably will work with us in the future, and share all the knowledge that we're gaining through these type of sessions. Before we jump into, I'm sure you guys are very excited to see what the platform looks like, but before we do that, I want to tell a little bit more about our vision. I think that will be, you would be interested in that. Yellowdig stands for creating communities where social interaction and learning build the relationships and skills that allow people to thrive. Essentially, as work gets more dynamic, it's demanding for students who are lifelong learners, who are dynamic themselves. Gone are the days where, let's say, one skill, if you are teaching, let's say, financial analysis or Python, picking up one skill does not mean that they're going to be employed for life. It's very likely, any skill that they pick up today, in a matter of years, within 5 years, they would be replaced by other more modern skill sets. So just learning very specific things is not enough. Our point of view is that to be successful in this world where things are changing so fast, learners have to pick up a broader set of skill sets, such as the ability to learn from other people, which is what we call social learning, or the ability to kind of consume information from a multitude of sources, which are rapidly increasing. And then also the ability to actually analyze them, synthesize them, and also debate around those information, and also build the interpersonal skill sets to disseminate that knowledge to a broader set of people. That's actually what's going to drive success for current and future learners. And we are very excited to have a mission in this very core area. And our belief is that to make this teachable, it's very important to build learning environments that are equally dynamic, that mirrors the world where the learners are going. And to do that, we spend a lot of time to really understand the motivators, the behavior trends that drive learners, and really design a system around it, as opposed to building it around processes and systems, which are tend to be very kind of time bound. It doesn't scale with time. So that's what we are shooting for. I know it's a very high level, but I'm sure, Tyler, when you start seeing the product, keep that in mind. I mean, that's what we are shooting for. Now, this number, I'm sure, most of you being in this space know about, which is almost 50% of the learners who are starting undergrad today do not graduate even after 5 years. And that's an average for the US at this point. And this retention issue is not only just in undergraduate, it's in online programs, it's in hybrid programs, it's in all sorts of environments. And the issue is that the retention is not only because something happens to somebody's life, but also because lack of engagement. And that's what we are solving for. We are trying to drive a learning environment where learners naturally engage with the content, with the peers, with the instructors, and actually stick around. And we will share some of the statistics later, like Brian Vadine is going to kind of show you some example studies that we have done to prove that if we can engage our learners in better ways, they tend to retain, or they tend to stick around for longer, which we all want. This is essentially a visualization of the entire student life cycle. One thing to point out here is that those of you who have known us for a while probably have been one of our early adopters. You may remember that we started within the classroom. Our initial hypothesis was that if we engage the learner within a course, that's kind of where it all starts. And that's very important. And we continue to believe that, and we are going to share many things around it. But with the Yellowdig Engage, we are actually expanding our reach for the learner and kind of trying to touch them right before they come into a school or a university or a program, so that they are much more attuned to learn and stick around. And then also, as they kind of take their courses, to kind of really ensure that they are getting connected to the peers, to their superiors, to the alumni, who can help them find the jobs that they want. And also, once they graduate, also become a lifelong learner, so that they can come back to the institutions, to the programs, to their peer group. This whole cycle is something that we have built into Yellowdig Engage, and something for you to kind of look for as you're looking at the demo. This slide is around our approach. As we start with working with universities and schools, what we bring in is a whole set of a fantastic tool, but also best practices that we have garnered over the years from a variety of partners, training materials so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, so you can directly train your instructors and students. But we also realize that every institution and the learners that they're catering to are different. The goals of your learners are quite different. So we like to bring the best practices, but we also like to measure the impact, which is the second bubble, which is essentially, and you'll see some examples today, how we are measuring impact for specific institutions that we are working with on our platform, how we are driving engagement, how we are driving retention. And then once we understand the impact we are creating, we are kind of scaling it up so that we grow with you, as opposed to, our KPIs are well aligned with the KPIs that you have. And this is my final slide, so that you can get to see the good stuff. But one thing I would say here, without getting too much into the detail, this shows 3 key performance indicators, or KPIs, that we impact: engagement, retention or course drops, and student satisfaction. We don't think those are 3 separate KPIs. We think they're completely interlinked. So if you drive higher engagement through better learning, more dynamic learning, leads to better retention. And when students are retaining because they're seeing more value that they're getting from their institutions and from their programs, they're more likely to be more satisfied in life. So they're going to say good things about the program. That kind of feeds back into more students for the program. It's more success for the institution, more success for the students, and more success for us. So these are the 3 KPIs that we measure, and we will talk about a lot as we go through this presentation. So that's the end of my section.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Sean.
I spoke quite quickly. I don't know if you have any questions.
Yeah, should anyone have any questions for Shaunak, we'll come back to them at the end of the presentation. You know, I think one of the things that Shaunak highlights is that Yellowdig Engage is not just a new technology. It's not just about new features or tools. It's really about a new direction for our company. And everything that we're doing as a company now aligns with this vision that we have to impact lifelong learning at scale and really to build communities, contextual communities across every aspect of that student life cycle. So for the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to start to highlight some of the major changes that we've made in the platform itself. We're going to demo the platform as well. And then we'll talk about some of what you can expect to see from us moving forward. But before I go very far, I think it's easy for folks like myself and maybe a lot of you on the phone today to really look beyond what happens when technology providers come out with new platforms, new upgrades. Oftentimes it's quickly looked at as a fresh coat of paint, and really it's the visual features and the new things visually that we focus upon. But this has been an undertaking that our technology development team has been undergoing since January of 2018. And there's far more work and far more exciting things happening in Yellowdig Engage than I could ever possibly cover here in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So this is my quick plug that next week we are going to be hosting a deeper dive into the technology, where I'll be bringing in our director of technology. We'll be reviewing the product in more depth than we can cover today. And we'll also be covering in depth things like our development process and why we develop the way that we do, and things on our roadmap, so forth. So if those things are interesting to you, we'll make sure that you get that registration link today as well. So what you now see before you is the first sort of A/B test here of Yellowdig Classic versus Yellowdig Engage. And most immediately, you should notice some of the visual changes. When we set out to build the new platform, one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did was make it easy to use on every device, making sure that it's easy to understand for new users. And while I think we got a lot of really great feedback that everybody loved Yellowdig Yellow, we wanted to take advantage of some opportunities to improve accessibility, to improve branding. In front of you on the right, you can see a new feature which I will demonstrate today, which is video capture in the platform. So know that a lot of this is visual, but there's far more to it than what just meets the eye here in regards to some of the changes. And I think to that end, it's important to talk about the fact that if we're going to impact lifelong learning at scale, and we're going to do so, as Shaunak had outlined, across that entire student life cycle, we have to talk about going outside of the LMS. For any of our clients on the phone today, most of our usage to date has been through an LMS integration, accessing Yellowdig from a core shell or from a programming canvas. Now we're opening up a world where you can integrate Yellowdig into your student portals. You can integrate Yellowdig into your websites, into your CRM, and actually power community engagement. A few examples of these communities here in the middle, really from a number of new touch points. And equally as important is the data, or are the data points that we can pull back from Yellowdig into your systems to inform additional strategies to improve student engagement, retention, success across every department in your institution. And that's where our partners will spend even more time with Brian, and that's where you'll see more from Brian in the later part of today's discussion, talking about how we're using that data in more interesting ways. So with that, let me actually go into the platform. So, there's really three key user groups that we're thinking about, when we're building product or when we're demoing the platform. Of course, students are a big persona there. We're thinking about our faculty. And then, of course, we're thinking about administrators. And I know that there's probably a mixed audience of administrators and faculty members and designers in the room today. For the sake of time, I'm going to show you a login experience through Canvas. Of course, one of many LMS that we support. And we still want to provide the same, basic framework for accessing Yellowdig. So we still leverage LTI. We can still use LTI in the same way that we did. However, one of the newer things that we're building are API integrations for various LMS. So in the case of Canvas, we will actually be providing additional integration strategies, something we'll go into more depth on in the next demo that we'll do next week. We'll actually showcase some of the portal integrations and such that we can build next week as well. But for today's purposes here, we're inside of a course community. So once you're in the community, for those that have used Yellowdig before, you're wondering, well, where did the top navigation go? You'll see that you still have the same, the same core settings, on the side nav here on the left. You have your feed, which is where all of that content lives. Here I just clicked into points. You have your community, you have your settings, all of those same core things. One of the things that we heard though was that there was just a lot of action, going on in and around the actual content in the feed. So one of the things that we've gone ahead and done is really centralized all of the navigation at the very top here. So you'll see that searching and collapsing posts and filtering, all of which is living at the very top of the navigation. And as I scroll here, you'll see that the side nav stays with me. So I can always access the various pages in the platform I might be interested in. Already you're noticing emojis, I'm sure, and wondering what those are. Now we have the ability to support a multitude of reactions to posts. Those reactions can tie into the point system, should you so choose them to do so. We have badges on posts. You can see here there's now a multitude of badges. You can create custom badges, another new feature. But at its core, the feed is made to operate in the same way. We didn't want to drastically change the nature of this feed. It's still really the one-stop shop for all of the content. You're still using your topics. You're still doing all of those things, but we wanted to structure it in a way that was much more friendly on a mobile device. And we wanted to take advantage of some of the things that we see students are used to, such as, these emojis here. Here's an example of video content, and I'm going to go in here in a second and actually show you how you can create content. But, as we got more feedback from our users, we learned that they really were expecting a number of new and interesting ways to create content. So this content editor is far more robust than it once was. You can see some of the things that you can do here inside of the content editor. I'll go ahead and actually quickly show you what it takes to record video. You asked to take over the webcam in your computer, and here you can see I could actually record myself as part of this live demo. Maybe I'm posting a video and I'm adding a poll to that. Maybe I'm sharing a video of myself and maybe 2 or 3 articles that I thought about as I shared my thoughts. There's now no longer just one piece of content that you can showcase in a Yellowdig post. There are a number of things that you can showcase: videos, articles, your own content, etc., all really organized nicely and neatly in a really visual way. The last newer feature I'll call to here is the ability to actually draw. So you can upload an image, into your post and actually annotate it, much like you would if you had it printed out in front of you. Another feature that came directly from feedback from our partners. So, just looking at how much time we have here together, I know there's only so many things that I can possibly cover in this feed. One of the things we've gotten so much feedback on is the point system, with the understanding that the point system adds tremendous value for our learners. We find for some professors, it aligns more seamlessly with their curriculum than others. So we're taking a step back and imagining new ways of representing the points. One of the things here that we're doing is better showcasing the grade, how far I am to that 100%. This My Points page is a brand new section of the platform that helps the user to understand really when they're earning their points and how they're earning their points. And of course, for the administrators, you now have multiple badges that you can add. You can build flagging mechanisms to flag certain posts. So you can expect more features to help your educators, your professors, to take more control over who's earning points and when those points are earned in your boards. For anybody that's used Yellowdig in a number of boards, there's a point in Yellowdig Classic where that board dropdown just got a little too clunky. All of those boards, which are there, which are active, which are not. Now we have a boards page, which is almost a home page for users, and it works dynamically. So those boards that they're accessing recently are going to surface to the top. And as professors, as administrators, as students access more boards and they join them, this is where they'll see those. And this is probably the last thing that I'll speak to here. One of the last few things I'll speak to here are just some of the administrative capabilities. It's hard to show these visually, but one of the things that we've done is we've built the notion of networks. So this will allow administrators to have control over which communities are accessible or viewable to which users. You can build different opportunities for branding. You know, maybe the business school's community page looks different than that of the School of Medicine or so forth. So you'll have the ability to build different networks, and that's something else we're going to dive far more deeply into next week. But one of the things I think I'm most excited about in this new experience is the notion of discovery. We have so much data on users, and we know the things they're engaging with and the things they're not. But as you do more in Yellowdig Classic, it's sometimes hard to use that data in interesting ways. Well, now this notion of discovery, the Discover tab here, will really be the foregrounds with which we can start to recommend communities. That's what you see here, that students can become a part of. But this is a place that we're going to continue to innovate upon, showcasing different things that we believe individual users will find interesting, trying to personalize discovery in as many ways as we can. And again, just to talk about that student experience and how there may be a number of boards, communities that students become a part of. You know, this is an example of a community that might be meant for an online cohort of students, say the class of 2021. And while I'm still in Canvas per se, now I'm accessing a co-curricular community. And you can see, again, the same feature set here that you saw, just used in a very different way. This is where we will go back and look at the integration possibilities and maybe build access points to these communities outside of Canvas from other student and administrative frameworks. So with that, I'm going to pause. I'm going to go back into the actual slide deck, and I can recap some of the changes because I went through that very, very quickly. And then I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Brian. So here is a summary of what we've changed. So we covered the new video recording feature, and that's something you're going to expect to see some additional innovation and evolution upon as we go. We talked about drawing and the ability to upload content and annotate it. Community discovery and the notion of finding new communities. How do we access those communities and from where? Enhanced accolading through the badges that you saw on the feed. The reactions, those emojis. While I didn't show you this, you can weight those reactions to be worth different points as students earn them. Language support. I mean, this is something we've heard often as we were in use globally, supporting different languages. If you have a need outside of English where you're looking to support the platform or show the platform in other languages, we now have a better framework for doing so as well. The top row here is entirely devoted to accessibility, and this is one of the biggest things that we're proud of in the Yellowdig Engage platform. The Yellowdig Engage platform is WCAG 2.0 AA compliant, and this is an area that we will continue to innovate. The responsive design, I can't pull up the mobile experience today. I will do that next week. But no matter the device, Yellowdig will provide a first-class experience, faster load times, and part of moving into that better technology framework means that we can move the needle there. And really the user interface is far more modern. Again, the most obvious, I'd say, upgrade. Last, the networks and sub-networking and providing better admin tooling, thinking about how we're going to use that data, passing that data back into your client-side systems, and a lot of what Brian's going to talk about today should help to get you thinking about how you might want to use your Yellowdig data as a client if you're not doing so. Enhanced grading capabilities, and then of course some naming changes. We're talking about networks and different things. So expect a lot more from us along these same themes. But I hope that this gives you a really good flavor for what we've built, what you now have access to, effective immediately, and what's to come. So now we're gonna pass it over to Brian here. I'm gonna switch microphones for him, and we'll take it from there.
Great. All right. So,
Tyler, I think there's a couple of questions in the chat.
yeah. So
yeah, I can take a look at those. In the interest of time, I'm going to let Brian get started, and then we can dive back to the questions as well.
all right. Great. So you know, as we mentioned at the outset of the webinar, our focus has really been on creating communities where the social interactions can really help build learning, skills, knowledge. And so I want to focus some of this, look at some of the data that we've collected on the idea around creating communities and how important that is. And if you want to jump to the next one.
Yeah.
Just to get a good idea of why good communities really matter. Traditionally in discussion forums and student interaction type portals, if grades were given for classes, it was really to get compliance and then to assess a student's work. And we really are trying to create a different model where the points and the grade that is given from those points are really used to modify behavior and reward the behaviors that actually produce good community behavior and get participants into a conversation. And the reason is because we really see those conversations are what is important for driving engagement and driving retention and sort of creating all of those linked outcomes. It's the student interactions. And in an assessment framework, a lot of times the grade is given or an assessment is used, and it's really, for the students, they think their job is to basically prove how smart they are. And it's to, the professor is trying to create a focused discussion on a single topic, usually for a specific week or something, and it begins and ends on a schedule. And then each week they're trying to restart what I would call a cold conversation. They're trying to restart a conversation from scratch. With our community framework, what we really see is that students internalize that it's their job to learn with others. They're not trying to prove how smart they are. They're trying to sort of share information that's relevant to each other that will help each other learn. And so, a healthy community is really focused around creating good interactions between everybody. When those discussions then happen, they're focused on things that are interesting to the actual community. It's not just what the professor thinks the students need to be thinking about, it's what the students are really trying to learn and struggling with and thinking through. And when you really use our best practices, there's an ebb and flow to conversations that make sure that the things that are being talked about are interesting and relevant to what is going on in the course. In a lot of ways, more focused than than answering a single question. And the good thing about conversations being able to continue from week to week in this sort of more free-flowing community atmosphere is that you get kind of overlapping waves of interesting questions where multiple conversations can start and stop, and there are more opportunities for everybody to be interacting in meaningful ways for the community. What we see is that when you really think about using the point system to modify behavior, and when you start adding Yellowdig's features on top of each other, you really do get a major positive impact, and that probably or definitely sort of is more than each individual feature by itself. And so here's just a good example of Yellowdig boards where specific recommended point settings and practices are being used. And you can see that as you add points and you add a grade passback and you have a weekly max in place, that you continuously build engagement and posting behavior. So these boards are definitely more active. We definitely increase engagement in boards where people are using the recommended practices of Yellowdig. And really, a lot of that extra engagement is coming out of conversations and getting good community behaviors established. And so, in traditional discussions, there's actually little back and forth discussion. And so you get very little interaction and little engagement. Even within Yellowdig, we can see the impact of point settings that really don't get, that aren't focused on building a conversation. So one of the top recommended practices is to make comments worth as much as pins, so that you're communicating to the students, actually talking and discussing with one another is important. And when you also provide points when students get more comments on their pins, you're focusing those students on, when they do create a pin, on actually getting a conversation started with their students. And what we see is when you actually reward the conversation and you reward the comments, you get a higher conversation ratio, which is what we talk about, in terms of comments per pin. But more importantly, students start interacting above and beyond the point requirement, the point goal. And so this is a good example from a single professor across 9 different semesters, where all he really did was mess around with the point system. And you can see that when you start to drive more conversation, students start to actually interact and start ignoring the point system and start sort of doing those intrinsic motivating factors to actually having a good discussion. One other thing we see in terms of engagement, we had a study where there was a sample of 3,000 students. We implemented Yellowdig in 3 different courses, where previously it had the courses had used Blackboard discussions. And what we find, again, is that students are posting more per student within Yellowdig compared to an LMS. And there's an increase in the total number of posts. But then, tying into what we said before, where these outcomes are sort of interrelated, what we also found within that study is that more students are continuing on through the course, not dropping the course, and then continuing also in the line of study onto the future courses. So we have this sort of strong line from having conversations and interactions to driving real engagement, and then that engagement leading to real improvements in retention throughout the student life cycle. What we also see, this is a study we did with Northwestern, sort of mapping networks within classes. What we see is that the students that are sort of on the periphery, they're posting still, but they're not really interacting with their classmates. Those students are the ones who are tending to report poor satisfaction within the course, and sort of being less likely to be retained. So we do know that, again, that interacting with others and actually having conversations is sort of where a lot of the real benefits of Yellowdig really reside. And just to run through some more data as far as efficacy now, we recently completed a study with Arizona State University with their online courses. They had 20,700 students that we matched their grades to Yellowdig behaviors approximately over the last year or so. And what we found is that there is a correlation between participating in Yellowdig and student outcomes, student grades. And so you get this nice line between students actually participating in Yellowdig and getting better grades in their courses. If you want to jump to the next one. Mm-hmm. What we also see is the best practices within that we recommend, when they're followed within these communities, we definitely are driving a higher conversation ratio with more students actually having conversations. And an interesting outcome from that is that when we then see, when we then look at the boards where the conversation ratio is higher, or where there's more posts and we would say that the community is really healthy, the correlations between student behaviors and outcomes really kind of go through the roof. And so in these boards where students are exposed to 5 of 6 of our best practices, the correlation between activity and grade outcomes is really high. We can predict about 36% of grade variability, just from knowing some Yellowdig behaviors. So the fact of the matter is there is a high relationship between participating in Yellowdig and grade. especially in communities that are really designed the way that we would envision. And just to give an idea about why, again, we think that the conversation is so important, is this is the sort of density pattern of students in terms of their total comments versus total pins. And for grades W, that's withdraw, and then E is sort of a failing grade going up to A. And you can see that the students who are getting better grades in these courses at ASU are the students who are tending to actually post more comments. There's a little bit of spread, along the x-axis for the total number of pins, but most of the extra activity is really in students having conversations with one another. And so, the important thing finally about this is that we know that when people are listening to each other, which is really required to have a good conversation back and forth with each other, we know when people are listening that those behaviors are really associated with the best learning outcomes. So in a lot of discussion boards, there's a focus on creating a lot of content. And we would really recommend sort of focusing on getting conversations going where students are actually reading things that are posted and then having a good back and forth conversation. And just one example of that is this study where the number of comments and upvotes given out to other students is actually what predicted getting better grades in courses.
So that's, yeah, I mean, that's all the content that we had planned for today. I know there were a number of questions. And from my perspective, I know, it's just helpful to hear some of the data to understand how we're going to design every implementation when getting started. It's around these best practices and these efficacy points that Brian's speaking to. With that, I'm going to open it up for questions. I know that there was one that came in from Joe from ASU, really a two-part question. The first of which around the actual My Points tab. I had clicked into it. We didn't really talk about it, so I'm going to go into it. The second of which being around, really what Yellowdig Engage is. Is it just sort of like a 2.0 of the same platform, or is it an entirely new platform that you need to sort of be onboarded onto as such? I would almost say both, Joe. We intentionally didn't want to create something that would require a ton of new onboarding for faculty and students. So what you see in regards to how Yellowdig will be used in courses would really be a 2.0 upgrade from how it's already in use. But beyond that, now there are a number of new use cases that we've sort of unfurled within Yellowdig Engage. And with that, it begs new conversations with different departments and stakeholders. And it results in a very new user experience if you're using Yellowdig outside of that course context. So when getting partners started, if you're already a client, this is something you already have access to. If you're not a client, this is something you would automatically start within. You're not going to start on Yellowdig Classic. We will look to move partners over strategically, but it doesn't come at any new cost for partners. If you have access to Yellowdig today, you have access to Yellowdig Engage. And I'm going to go here into the points tab. I should mention that I'm logged in right now as the professor. So while I have some points in here and I have some data in here, it might look a little different than that of a student. And you can see that I have a much richer sense for how I'm earning my points, a reiteration of some of the settings that my instructor had set forth for me. In this case, I set forth for myself. And I can see here, a sense for what I've done this week versus the week previous. So this is a week-by-week snapshot of those points. And as the instructor, you can see that for each of your students, and you can look at a graph. This graph has no activity on it. If I go to last week, let's see if maybe this user did. You'll see something like this, where I get a sense for how those points are earned and when for each user. And this is something, again, I think we're going to continue to iterate on. This is really the starting point here. we now have a much better ability to analyze our data specific to points and earnings and different things of that nature. So expect more to come here. Great. And for those who hadn't yet seen, Brian did share both links to the webinar that we're hosting next week, as well as the webinar that he and his team are going to be hosting, a series of webinars. And I want to give you want to speak a bit to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the data that I just showed is really a sneak peek of some of what that's covering, but we're going to really get into sort of the nitty gritty of answering some frequently asked questions with some data visualizations that we have. And just so everybody knows, each of those webinars is just going to be the same. We want to give people an opportunity to ask questions, so we're hosting a couple of those. You definitely don't need to register for all three.
And we've seen a few questions come in about accessing a recording of this presentation and accessing the slides. You'll receive both, and we'll see that you can share that easily with your colleagues.
Mary had a question about the video.
Okay, I see a question here from Pauline as well. Do you want to address Mary's?
Yeah, so Mary Loader asks, how long does it take for a video to process when recorded in the system? Have you added the ability to add captions to those videos? It's a fairly quick upload into the system. So, when people capture the video, it'll upload immediately. I guess if it was a really long video, it might take a few seconds or whatever, but it's pretty quick. As far as the ability to caption, this is a brand new feature for us. I think the answer to that question is right now there is no captioning. We've been looking at a number of different integrations with various softwares that people are using, and we're also really actively building additional features for this. We know that that's an important accessibility issue, and it's one of the few things that has been built in this new platform that is currently a little bit out of sync with all of those needs. But we are seeing a lot of interest in the video function, and certainly if people are wanting that, definitely let us know. And I think it's it's definitely something we want to be able to do.
That's right, and we can talk more about what's on that roadmap for us in next week's webinar. So Mary, if you're interested, we can talk more about video on that discussion as well. I saw a question from Pauline at Montclair State, who had a question about the notion of total participation and really what students can see. In this community tab here on every single board or every single community, there is a leaderboard. So I don't necessarily know how many points Stephen has versus Sarah, but what I do know is that these are the top contributors. So if I'm looking at myself here listed on this follower list, and I'm not seeing myself on the leaderboard, that's a notion that I'm probably looking to improve. And we can think about different ways of presenting this data to students. This is a great opportunity for students to reflect on how they can improve as well. And students will see week over week, which weeks that they're doing more work and not. So it helps them to understand, and reflect where they were their best in Yellowdig, so that they can constantly look to improve that. So just to clarify here, we have not yet sent a link to sign up for next week's webinar. We wanted to get this one under our belt first. In our follow-up email that will include the recording of this presentation as well as the slide deck will be the link to the registration. Now for John, I do see that you might not have seen it. There was a link to this registration for the 31st webinar already shared in the sort of public chat space. So I would recommend that you reference that. I'll see that you get that as well. And Joe from ASU, similarly, you maybe just saw an email this week from us that contained a link to that registration. If not, we will see that there's a link to that registration in our follow-up email as well. So with that, I know that we're right close to the 45-minute mark. Should anybody need to drop, please feel free to do so. but that was a pretty efficient use of time here. It looks like that is all of the questions that were asked have been addressed. If not, I'll see that everybody has our contact information in our follow-up email as well. We would love for this to really spark, follow-up discussions with you if there are things that you're interested in learning more about, or things that you want to bring back for a more intimate audience for your institution specifically. Please do reach out. We would love to continue those conversations. So with that, thank you, everybody. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see some of you in our webinar next week. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.